This is the facelifted 2018 Land Rover Range Rover HSE TD6. There are faster Range Rovers and there are more expensive Range Rovers, but this is the sweet spot of the lineup. It's got all the capability, less some of the more insane options offered on top trim models. A bargain, perhaps? Well, not really. This is still a lot of money, which is a great jumping off point. How does $113,000 sound as a base price? Well, how does $130,000 sound? Even better, right? Or worse, depending on your perspective. And how did I get from 113 to 130? Well, mostly cosmetic changes. I've got 21-inch gloss wheels that look pretty badass. I've got a Rossello paint that's new for 2018, and that's a fancy word for purple. I think it actually kind of looks cool. Never thought I'd like a purple car, but here we are. I've also got a more than $3,000 entertainment package in the back seat. That's cool. That's 2 screens on the back of the headrest. Not just for streaming videos, watching DVDs, whatever. It actually controls the seat functions back there. Reclining seats, super comfortable. Also gives you GPS map options and so on. So that's a big wow factor, and my passengers this week have been very thankful for that. I've also got some additional safety tech features, things that frankly I think should be included for a base price of $113,000. I've got a heads-up display here. Also have radar guided cruise control. So more about that little niggle later on. So this is an expensive vehicle. Again, $130,000 before your taxes, and that is certainly going to elevate my expectations. So what is this Land Rover Range Rover? Well, we've got a full-size luxury SUV, and this has been around in one shape or another since the late 1940s. A lot has changed between that time and now. Specifically, we're way more about luxury than we were back then, but it hasn't lost any of its functionality, including its amazing terrain response system, which gives it perhaps unrivaled off-road ability. Even though I don't think any Land Rover, Range Rover buyers are going to go off-road, you have that option, and we're going to talk about that in a sec. But back to the design of this vehicle and the lineage of it. I think that they do something kind of cool, and that's evolutionary design. Now, another brand that does this, Porsche, of course. You can tell a Porsche, you can tell a Land Rover, whether it's 60 years old or 5 years old. And if you like it, that's good news. If you're not a big fan of the boxy design of this Range Rover, then, well, that's not going to sit too well with you. The outside is so weighty, so substantial. It's bold, it's brash, and I use the words weighty often. And what I mean by that, I just describe the visual heft of the vehicle, and there's perhaps no heftier vehicle on the road today than this Range Rover. Now, this is the 2018 facelifted model. This particular model has been on the road for a long time. It's a little bit overdue for a complete overhaul, but in the meantime, we'll have to do with this refresh. And what does that give you? Well, a more svelte, slightly more athletic appearance. We've got revised front and rear bumpers. We've got new headlights. They've given us some new trim bits. So even though it's a bit of an improvement, I still personally think it looks every single one of its nearly 5,000 pounds. It sits a bit heavy on its wheels, especially when you've got the air suspension lowered down into enter and exit mode. When you get into this vehicle and you sit down in the driver's seat, you can see just how boxy and old school it is. This A-pillar is really, really thin and super upright. You get such an amazing view of the road, partially because of the seating position. Standard seats are 18-way adjustable and covered in leather, of course. Very comfortable, tons of adjustability, including thigh adjustability, which is always great for tall or bigger drivers. And the view is just phenomenal, which maybe explains why I feel like every Range Rover on the road doesn't use its turn signal. But anyways, the inside of this cabin is old school luxury. It's very square, very angular, in keeping with the exterior design, but there's leather everywhere. Leather on the top with beautiful stitching right along the dashboard, leather on the upper and lower door panel, nice wood trim, nice aluminum bits along the top of the door sill, and the buttons for your side view mirror and your windows, which are all auto, one up, one down, front and rear. So this is a nice place to be with a little old world charm. Now, one big change on the inside is the adaptation of a Velar style infotainment setup. So we've gone to 2 screens here. Top screen is for typical infotainment duties, navigation, radio, etc. Lower screen is mostly for vehicle settings. So you adjust your seats here, the HVAC controller, your vehicle settings, and so on. Visually quite striking. They've balanced it a little bit. In the Velar, it's very avant-garde, some different materials, a little more contemporary looking in that vehicle. Here, it's a mix of old world and new world, so more wood trim and aluminum pieces than shiny piano gloss trim. Now, I love the system in that Velar. I thought it was a big step forward in terms of design and usability and legibility. And while it has those things here, the usability is weak. I've found it so laggy. There's something about the application in this particular vehicle that has changed this. I've had an issue with my backup camera. It seems to only work intermittently. The entire infotainment screen has gone black on me a couple of times, or just takes a number of seconds to respond to my finger touch. So that's been really disappointing for me. I can't really understand why from one vehicle to the other it doesn't work. But anyways, that's what we have here. Now, we also have a digital dashboard. It's very bright, very attractive looking, sharp graphics. You can change the orientation and layout of the gauges, things you've come to expect from a digital dashboard layout. But again, same problem. For whatever reason, even though this is the exact same setup as the Velar, it's laggy. When I touch the button on the volume, it's laggy. When I touch the menu and try to scroll through my trip meter, for example, or my navigation, I have the same problem where it doesn't seem to be responding and I have to push and jam it down. So really frustrating, especially because this vehicle is so expensive. Since I'm bored out of my mind going about 20 kilometers per hour on the highway, why don't I talk about something else that's really boring, and that is the rear cargo privacy cover. Yeah, I'd never talk about this normally, but it's so bad in this car that I have to, because if you buy one of these things, you're gonna have to deal with that. Rather than being just a slide out thing that every other car on the road has, it's a really complicated accordion shape. Now, the actual material itself is high quality, but it's so unbelievably over-engineered. And I took it out earlier to fit some stuff in the back. And when I went to put it back in, it took me 15 minutes. I had to watch a YouTube video and get out the owner's manual to figure out how to put this thing back in. There's just a weird alignment of slides and clips, and it's just so annoying. Now, the upside of that rear cargo area is it's absolutely massive and it's super square, which means you can put a ton of stuff back in there. Now, with the air suspension, there's a button in the rear that you just press and it'll lower the rear of the car, which helps you with load height. Also, there are some other buttons there you can press that'll slide the rear seats, the second row seats up, and even the first row seats up if you have something really long. So this is still a practical vehicle, but it's got the world's worst privacy cover. You've got your choice of 3 power plants in the Range Rover. 2 of them are supercharged V8 engines, both of which sound very lovely and are very fast and have well over 500 horsepower. Now, this is the base model, the TD6, much more modest power plant. It's a 3-liter turbocharged V6 engine. The big difference here is it is a diesel, and I love diesel, and this is why. 245 horsepower, not that much for a big vehicle like this, but it's got 443 foot-pounds of torque, and that's available right down low. And the benefit there is in and around town in day-to-day driving situations up to about 60 kilometers per hour, there's a ton of torque. So I've got a bit of an opportunity to take a sprint here, put my foot to the floor, tons of power. Now, right about there, it starts to die off, 60, 70 kilometers per hour. It starts to lose a little of the top end. So if outright performance is for you, then you're gonna wanna spend a little bit extra cash for one of these supercharged V8 engines. But if you're a little more frugal, if you value fuel economy and you like that usability of a diesel, then this TD6 is all you really need. Let's talk about the suspension, because it really is a defining trait of this vehicle, but also of the Land Rover brand, because keep in mind this vehicle and this brand wasn't about luxury, right? It was always about rugged capability, and even though now this is a $130,000 luxury SUV, it hasn't lost any of that off-roading capability, and it starts with the electronically controlled auto leveling air suspension, which gives you a huge range of different driving capabilities. So if you want to have this vehicle right on the ground, either to make it easy to get in and out of, or for dynamic driving, you can do that. If you want to have it jacked all the way up to deal with some ruts, some nasty road conditions, some snow, some rocks, you can also do that. It's got a system of cameras to help you place the front wheels. It's got complex differentials and other electronic trickery that are going to ensure that you do not get stuck. It's got a downhill assist mode. It's got pop-ups on the heads-up display and also in your media screens. You really, if you get this vehicle stuck somewhere, it's because you were being an idiot, not because this vehicle is somehow inadequate. So that's a nice feature of this car, to know that you're wafting down the road, smelling finely crafted leather, but also you're going to get out of just about any jam you can imagine. It goes without saying that the average buyer of a $130,000 SUV is never, ever, ever going to take this thing off-road. So it's equally important that it performs on the black stuff, and this one does pretty well with a couple of exceptions. So it's a big vehicle, it drives that way. It's noticeably top-heavy. It has a huge amount of body roll, especially on your initial turn-in. Some of that I really think is unavoidable. It's just physics. This is a big car. It's top-heavy in design, a lot of weight, even though the newer generations, due to aluminum architecture, have shed some of that heft. There's only so much you can do. I will say this, though, it's not sloppy. It has a sense of solidity. It feels like a quality product. All of that suspension, the heave that you do feel, that nosedive under braking, is really predictable. You kind of get used to it. And the payoff, I think, is that you do have a degree of comfort and detachment from the road that Range Rover owners really, really like. One thing I've been disappointed with is the amount of chop and chatter I'm getting into the cabin. Now, not helping that are 21-inch wheels. Those are fashion forward and are never good for ride quality. But the big thing here is the Velar that I drove recently, which is lower in the brand range. It's a much cheaper vehicle, smaller, was much smoother. That had a much more Range Rover-y ride. I was expecting it to be the other way around. Now, either maybe my expectations are incorrect, this being the first time I've driven this particular model, or perhaps it's just the aging architecture that's, well, starting to show its age. This Range Rover offers a compelling mix of unrivaled off-road capability, undeniable status, and a visual presence on the road not easily replicated. When you opt for the TD6 power plant, you can depend on reliable, smoothly delivered torque and very impressive fuel economy. In fact, I finished my weekly run at 9.2 per 100K, and this is after having made zero attempt to conserve fuel. Without a doubt, for me, the biggest issue with this vehicle is the laggy infotainment system. For whatever reason, it worked really well in the Velar, but in this Range Rover, not so much. However, in nearly every other way, this is an exquisitely crafted product with a high attention to detail. It's comfortable, it's stylish, it's capable, if perhaps in some ways flawed. Without a doubt, this vehicle will continue to be the default I've made it SUV, at least along major city streets where, ironically, its biggest competitive advantages are rarely, if ever, exploited.